A few moments ago I informed my Nationals colleagues that I intend to retire from federal parliament at the next election. I'll stand down as Leader of the Nationals and Deputy Prime Minister at a convenient time for the government, probably within the next few days. The Nationals will be meeting this evening to choose a new leadership. It's been a great pleasure and privilege to be a member of the federal parliament. Next month will be 26 years since I was first elected to the parliament and 40 years since I was first elected to public office as a member of the Kingaroy Shire Council. In my early years, I was always talked about as the youngest National President of Rural Youth, the youngest councillor, the youngest mayor, but now that I'm numbered amongst the oldest, I think it's time to go. I'm grateful to the people of Wide Bay who have, through 5 redistributions, elected me 9 times to the House of Representatives. While my electorate still has many troubles, a lot has been achieved over that time. Huge improvements in the road network, and we've been able to help with some really significant projects in the area, like the construction of the Brolga Theatre, the Aquatic Centre in Gympie. But for me, always the greatest pleasure has been coming from being able to help somebody with a little problem, a problem with their pension or the need to provide some kind of assistance to find their way around the government bureaucracy, etc. Those have always, as a Member of Parliament, given me the greatest pleasure. I can recall that for a while I was the member for Queensland's oldest town, Gayndah, which is now in the electorate of the Honourable Member for Flynn. And I was able to get some federal funding for a school building for St Joseph's School in Gayndah. The diocese had been threatening to close the school down. It was in financial difficulties and only a relatively small student numbers, but we were able to build them a new classroom. And it was the first new building at that school since 1942. And that, I think, is the sort of special memories that people have from a period as a representative. It's been particularly an honour to be leader of the Nationals over the last 8 years. When I became leader in 2007, nobody wanted the job, including me. I'm pleased to say that now things are different and everyone wants the job. And I'm particularly proud and pleased that whoever is elected as my successor and whoever becomes the new deputy leader, if there's to be a new deputy leader, that I will be proud to serve under any of them. What I guess my objective was when I became leader, a somewhat reluctant leader, was to rebuild a party that was at that stage at a pretty low ebb. We had lost the 2007 election, everybody was pretty dispirited, our numbers had declined, and indeed the media was saying yet again that the Nationals were finished. Never. Of course, we're used to that. They've been saying that for over 80 years now, and we seem to have managed to survive most of our critics. And I'm sure that the party will be in good and strong hands in the years ahead. It's been a pleasure to serve with so many other wonderful colleagues in the Parliament. I've had the privilege of being a minister for 12.5 years, most of them in the Cabinet, and each portfolio has, for me, some special memories. My first portfolio was as the junior minister in the industry portfolio, and the first submission I took to Cabinet was Australia's first country of origin labelling legislation. And I notice it seems to be on the agenda yet again, although I don't think there was too much wrong with the original legislation, I have to say, but I might be biased. When I then also was involved in the rebuilding of the Customs Service, which didn't have a very high public esteem at the time, and Amanda Vanstone followed me, and she really put some verve into the revitalisation of the Customs Service. I was the first minister with special responsibility for Centrelink. And when Centrelink was established, it wasn't as well respected, I guess, as it is today. There were lots of critics, and people who'd been taken from 2 former government departments to put into Centrelink resented it to some extent, and It took a while to establish a service culture, the idea that a government department should be there to look after people. It might seem pretty elementary in this day and age, but it was a major challenge at the time. I had 6 years as Minister for Agriculture, and I have to say that was a portfolio I never wanted. Now, I had been in farm industry politics before I came into the parliament, and I knew how farmers treated their agriculture ministers, particularly when they were Nationals. They expected all sorts of things from us that were simply undeliverable. And somebody has said to me it's a bit akin to the Labor Party members who have to be industrial relations ministers. You just simply cannot achieve what your constituency expects of you. But it was a very eventful time. It was the era when we had the threat of the foot and mouth disease outbreaks in the UK, and the size of our quarantine service was doubled at that time, and it certainly became a very much more substantial operation. I was the minister during the establishment of the Exceptional Circumstances Drought Assistance, a very sad and really difficult time for so much of Australia. The whole of the country was essentially racked by drought at that time, and the assistance that was put in place was the most generous that governments had ever provided. And I think it helped a lot of farmers through a situation they could otherwise not have managed. But there are also adjustment packages, particularly in the sugar and the dairy industry, again caused quite some trouble, but I think have helped put those industries in a much better position. I was Trade Minister for a while. That was my least fulfilling portfolio, I have to say, and particularly by comparison with the great successes of the current Trade Minister, my achievements were very small. We were certainly, they were still trying to breathe oxygen into the Doha round at that stage, and it was really a wasted period. And I stand in awe of what Andrew Robb has achieved in his time as Trade Minister. It's truly a remarkable time in our history. But perhaps I've had two periods when I've been Transport Minister, and that's perhaps been the most exciting times, because we've been building a lot of roads, a lot of railway lines, a lot of infrastructure, and I'm very proud of what's been achieved in that regard. We will, by the end of this decade, for the first time, have a 4-lane highway between our 3 East Coast capitals, and surely a country of our economic capabilities, that is something that we should have achieved perhaps a long time ago. In my own area, I've had a particular interest in the Bruce Highway and the need to upgrade it. It was the most dangerous road in Australia on our national highway list. Indeed, at its worst, we were averaging 53 deaths on the Bruce Highway every year. And with the work that's been done by successive governments, and some of it's minor stuff like wide centre lines, etc., the death toll now is averaging just 17. Now that's far too many, but it does demonstrate that investments in capital infrastructure not only have an economic impact, they have a huge social benefit as well. And I'm sorry that I won't be here to see the end of the upgrade of the Bruce Highway. Just like there are many other projects that are underway, when you leave there's a lot of unfinished business, and that's certainly true when you have a $50 billion infrastructure program. I'd particularly love to have been here for the landing of the first aircraft at Badgerys Creek Airport, but that would be another 20 years, well, not quite that long. It'll be 2025, and I'm sure I'm not going to be, I hope I'm still alive to see it land for the first time, but because that's a project that I've been very excited about and delighted to be a part of bringing it to fruition. Can I thank the many people that I've worked with in the coalition with the Liberal Party? Sometimes it's been a bit rugged, but usually we've got on exceptionally well together. And I acknowledge the leaders that I've had to work with and under, particularly John Howard, who was such a successful Prime Minister and led a very, very able and agile government. The Liberal leaders, Brendan Nelson, Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull, I've admired them all and appreciated the privilege of working with them. I suppose especially Tony Abbott's commitment to infrastructure was one that I shared, and to have Joe Hockey as Treasurer, who was also prepared to find the money, that made my time as Transport Minister really an exciting one, and I certainly wish the government every success in fulfilling the objectives that have been set, Malcolm Turnbull as leader now has obviously revitalised our parties and put us in a good position for the future, and I certainly wish them well. I'd also like to acknowledge in my own party, my deputies as leader, Nigel Scullion and Barnaby Joyce, both great people to work with. And I'd particularly also like to acknowledge the people within my National Party organisation. I was a member of the party for many years before I was a candidate, so I'm a bit of a child of the organisation and still love it and appreciate it. And I acknowledge the presidents and the ordinary branch people, the people who've helped in my campaigns over the years, but particularly those who've ensured that there's a strong base to keep our party strong so it can contribute effectively to our nation. I'd also like to recognise the departmental people that I've had the privilege of working with. I'd like to particularly acknowledge Mike Taylor and Mike Murdoch, who've been departmental directors for the longest time while I've been their minister. Both were outstanding public servants, and Mike in particular, Mike Murdoch, who's the current director, served both sides of politics, and is an extraordinary individual with an incredible knowledge of what happens in the department and how it all works. In my 18 years as minister and shadow minister, there were two shadows that were with me most of that time, or against me, I suppose, most of that time, Simon Crean and Anthony Albanese. And yes, we've had again our disputes about issues, but we've been able to work through most of the things that needed to be worked through, and whether I was on that side or this side of the House, we've had, I think, the kind of working relationship that's necessary to achieve important things for our country. Finally, I want to acknowledge my electorate staff. They've been some of my electorate staff. One of my electorate staff I inherited from my predecessor, and all of them have been with me for decades. I have only had two chiefs of staff in all the time that I have been a minister, and for that matter a shadow minister, Cheryl Cartwright and David Withrow, and they've been wonderful leaders for my office and its organisation. All of those things have meant a great deal to me, to have these wonderful staff who help make our offices work and deliver the important things for our country. Finally, I want to acknowledge my family, and particularly my wife Lynn. We were married only a few months before I was elected to Parliament, and she had worked for my predecessor. So in reality she knew more about the job than I did when we came here. But we've been very much a team, and I could not have done it without her, and she's just been absolutely marvellous for me, and I love her dearly. I came from a small farming district. I went to a very small state school, and I've had the privilege now to become Deputy Prime Minister of our country. I wonder whether I'll be the last person with a limited education who comes from one of the poorest electorates in the country to become Deputy Prime Minister. I hope not, because I think we do need amongst the leadership of our country a breadth of experience and a breadth of skills. I want to thank the people of Australia for the opportunity that they've given me to serve in this regard. I'll take away many happy memories, and I hope that people may be kind enough to recognise that I've made something of a contribution towards public life in this country. It's been an honour for me and a privilege to work with everyone in this room. Thank you.